Good afternoon, and it's a great pleasure to be in Moscow once again. Russia is one of my favorite countries to visit, see the development in their industry, and really look at the creativity and the challenges the industry faces here. In the session today, we have a distinguished set of panels that includes Russian producers, companies that offer a huge amount of services like Transneft, our sponsor from SPbMTSB, who made this possible really, and sectors of the private industry like Shell, technology companies associated with Shell, actually, and PRS, among others. The objective of this session is for all of us to debate and explore the opportunities the market is providing or taking away, and how we are able to evolve and adapt to that set of conditions. In the marketplace, it's actually a very binary environment where there are winners and losers. But if you think in a slightly different way, you use those challenges to grow together and offer services to make a better industry. For Russia and for any other producer, it's very critical that the right price formation is generated, the right price is published and generated by the trading activity, because taxation and overall well-being of a country is behind it. This is the same case whether it's Texas or Siberia or Saudi Arabia. One of the critical things for us as an industry is also stability. However, we know that stability is a dream. It's not a reality. Changes are always happening. Some of these changes are because of policy. Some of these changes are because of what I'm going to call human instability, like the attacks into Saudi Arabia's installation. And some just happen, like an unexpected breakdown in the flow of operations, as we saw with the quality from Transneft's delivery of oil. And another driven by human acts, by policy, that in a way may not even be considering the long-term impact. We have seen overnight that some of the shipping rates from the US to Asia are as expensive as $10 million per vessel because of the new sanctions that the US has put on the shipping company COSCO. This alters the tradability of some crudes. It bottles them in if it's too expensive to ship out, and distorts what should be a free market process. But that's the reality of what we have. So as an industry here, we, some of us are a little bit mature, for lack of even other term, and have been working together on pricing issues for a long time. I used to work at Platts. Some of my ex-colleagues are here. I also have very good relationships with the folks from Argus. People like Mark and I discuss price formation and complex systems many years ago. And that brings us really to one of the last issues in my monologue. We are not discussing here how to set pricing as a group. We are putting ideas individually that maybe the market develops and adopts later on, but we are not engaging in any price formation as a whole. We are all independent. We compete against one another. We are going to be very open and truthful. And then we see what opportunities and ideas come here. I would like to start the session by really thanking Alexei again for the opportunity to be here. And if nobody minds, particularly yourself, Marian, I will start with him, but then I'll follow with you. So, Alexei, I have some questions that maybe you help us explore and set the stage here. Russia is among the 3 top producers of oil in the world, and is probably is actually the second largest exporter of crude oil, because it has a large domestic refining industry, and is the producer, I think we can say that, of the largest or second largest bundle of crude oil of the same quality, i.e. Urals. This is a very large block of oil that any PRA would essentially, well, this is not the right terminology, but would die to have in the price formation, because any price formation right now is using very small volumes of crude to determine price, whether it's Brent or Dubai. The quality of WTI in the US is too diverse, while Urals is one single stream of roughly the same quality. You have been driving the process to try to generate a market and create a price formation. But the reality is not among the top tier. It's still a work in progress. So I would like you to share with us what have been your challenges, lessons learned, and what you're planning for the future, and how you intend to serve better the Russian industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question, dear ladies and gentlemen. I guess partially the answer to the question that Jorge has addressed to me is the number of people in this room. That is the answer to your question. The number of people in this room indicates the level of interest to this topic. We have Russian international traders, Russian international trading companies. There is great interest towards this issue, which means the market believes that the changes are there to come. Otherwise, why would we all be here speaking about one and the same issue again and again? We've tried to attack this issue, the problem that Jorge has described. We tried to attack it very directly. And the problem is simple. The problem is that Russia is delivering a large bulk of crude oil to the global market, but as of today is not a price maker, but rather a price taker. And coming ahead a little bit, I would say immediately that it is also reflected in the fact that Russian oil companies, in their daily practice, focus on the price formula, both in long-term contracts and the short-term tenders that all Russian companies do from time to time. So we are following the laws and rules of the global market. We stick to them, and we are not taking any serious effort to change them. We try to attack this situation. We try to change it, and we've chosen the obvious path. We tried to launch the deliveries futures on the Urals brand FOB Primorsk. The benchmark, or the physical benchmark of the price of Russian oil as of today is non-existent. It has never existed before, it is still now there, so we had no other choice rather than to try to launch a delivery contract. We could not launch any other option because we do not have an underlying asset as such, so we had to choose the delivery option. So far, this contract is not traded. We do not recognize any liquidity, and probably that is the key difficulty that we've faced. And I think that this difficulty is due to the fact that the mechanisms existing in the industry are quite inert and slow. That also applies to the oil companies and trading companies that are used to operate with the Russian companies in a particular manner. And you cannot simply jump over this cliff in one leap. However, launch of such a contract initiated an extensive discussion, both within the Russian companies and also within the government and the regulating authorities. And the work that we are conducting today is not doing by our mercantile exchange alone, but also with the partnership of the central bank, the government, and the market players. So the launch of this contract just pushed this stone from the hill, and now the stone is rolling. We've been asking ourselves the question many times. Maybe we shouldn't have launched this contract. Maybe we should just get prepared, talk to the market, talk to the people, persuade them. But I think probably then nothing would be happening at all. I do not know whether I may say that it was a bit of a provocation, but I think that was a bit of a provocation. That was a turning point. Once we launched this contract, it's time to act. At the moment, under the current circumstances, we're certainly not happy with what we have. We're not satisfied with what we have, but we keep investing in this work, and now we focus our effort in a somewhat different area. As I said at the very beginning, there is no physical benchmark of the Russian oil, because the tender prices are not known to us. They are based on a formula. That is why, as of today, the stock exchange is operating on a launch of electronic mechanisms, electronic tenders, in order to conduct auctions by the Russian companies for the sales of physical oil of Russian origin. We have some good experience in this regard. We worked with Neft in this regard. We also worked with Rosneft. They used our platform to conduct more than 1,400 different tenders with the deliveries both to the domestic market and also for the export. And that is the foundation that we build on further. We further fine-tuned the functionalities and features of our trading platforms in order to be compatible with the procedures of sales of crude oil adopted in Russia. And we suggest those platforms and features to other companies in order to optimize their business processes without changing them too much. And that is important. If we would try to change it all at once in a spare of a second, it definitely wouldn't work. So it is important for us that we've started this movement. It is still work in progress. We work with the companies, market players, and government authorities. We believe in this topic, similarly as you do, hopefully, and I guess that is why you're with us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So if I may summarize, you have been trying quite hard, investing quite hard. Maybe the effort was a little bit too early, but there is development happening, and there have been many auctions that have occurred in the system. By the way, I have noticed that many exchanges are now testing the auction mechanisms to bring essentially the buyer and the seller together. I am not sure if the effort is to take away the function that a normal broker does, or the effort that a price publishing company does, or to merge the two to generate a price. But any mechanism that brings transparency and the buyer and the seller together, at the end of the day, contributes to the price formation, and is something that, in theory, a regulator or a government should enjoy, because then the price is ironclad. It's not bilaterally done in a back room, is in a public environment. So I have seen a lot of the efforts more and more this year by other exchanges going there. I think, frankly, you should congratulate that you were one of the first in going into the auction mechanism. And as we go forward here, I wanted to ask Miriam the following issue. It is undeniable that you cannot conduct these exercises in price discovery and enabling the marketplace to come together without technology. And you need to have two kinds of technology. One technology for a commoditized instrument, where essentially you just click a button and you can buy and sell the same thing every day, as in the same stock every day or in a futures instrument, or a customizable mechanism where you can offer something that is very unique today only or tomorrow only. And Miriam, you're working in the technology side and trying to use blockchain and various newer mechanisms. How do you see your role? And is this entirely just commercial to connect people and data transmission among companies, or does it have a greater use?
Thank you, Jorge, and thank you, Alexei, for having us here. Great question, and maybe I provide a bit more context around what we do. So my team at Shell, we look after and work on the convergence of the data economy with the hydrocarbon economy. And what that really means is that we believe in the transformational value and the value potential at the intersection of data economy with the traditional economies, obviously starting with the hydrocarbon one, because that's where we are. So you mentioned blockchain and tech. Of course, they're interesting, but only as enablers. Our work is around business model development, and let me explain what I mean by that. What technology has created today is new ways of working together. It's created the opportunity for cooperative ventures that drive increased efficiency, compliance, transparency, and so value across the supply chain and across the economy for suppliers, customers, and energy players in the middle. And it does that really because something like distributed ledger technology with blockchain is a form of, it allows us to safeguard sensitive information while collaborating on common operational problems and challenges, some of which we've started to talk about here. What we do and what we've worked on a lot at Shell and in my organization is around doubling down on the potential for these cooperative ventures to be able to solve common problems and create common value. And ventures such as VACT and COMGO have been our first forays into that, and we've got others in design. Why do I bring that in? Because they provide a model and empirical evidence that there are ways for us to collaborate compliantly across the supply chain and across industry and industry to address some of these challenges in a more efficient way, in a more transparent way, and actually in a far more compliant way, because data gets safeguarded, everything that needs to be done around the operations gets tackled. And so there's immense opportunity in that space from our point of view. And Jorge, the other thing I would add is, in fact, much of the work we do will bring new competition and far more competitors into this space, which is great.
Let me interject there for a minute. In what you're doing in theory and in practice, it should bring what I would call data integrity. You are sure that a transaction has happened, and this ledger essentially means it's stored properly, and all the attributes of that transaction are passed on to the next one: the size, the quality, the loading dates, anything that defines the transaction. And I know from my own experience that when I was at the front end of price discovery, when I talked to the industry and I heard a transaction was done and I queried the buyer or the seller or both, I always had some doubt after. Over time, I became a very suspicious fellow. Mark knows that very well. And it would have been great, and now the technology has this, offers this capability, that maybe there is a security in that data. And even for somebody like an exchange, whether it's the SPbMX, DME, who also has auctions, or the CME, or even some of the publishers have auction systems, there is a need for the trail of the transaction. And what I am wondering is if you're envisioning or trying to go into that space and help them enable and protect that data integrity. So it becomes transparent that everybody can use it and say, yes, it happened, and I know all the details are properly stored.
Absolutely. I mean, you couldn't have done a better pitch if we tried. I think what's beautiful about technology is it now provides a single version of the truth that's reconciled and owned by all counterparts. No one other than the two counterparties transacting need know what sits in there, but it's available. It's also available for regulators, should they wish to have access, which creates a very different dynamic in the compliance world and transparency world around some of the challenges you're describing. I always like to think of it as augmenting human intelligence and augmenting human capability. And that enables us to have humans do what they're really great at and have technology back it up in a way that doesn't lead itself to fraud.
Let me follow a little bit of this idea of the auction mechanisms that in theory will provide more transparency to the markets, provided people can see it. It can happen openly, and the data is stored either by the exchange or by a third party properly. I'm going to go out of sequence here, and I want to ask my dear friend Nikolai if he can help us with these ideas. Surgut Neftegas produces ample amounts of crude oil and sells them through various mechanisms. And those mechanisms, of course, in the history of Surgut are private, between themselves and the client. Sometimes it involves a small group of clients and they negotiate these transactions. But if you could explain, Nikolai, if you could explain to us a little bit of your business, and are you open potentially for more technology and use the mechanisms the market is providing, which in theory would generate data that then has almost that imprimatur of quality? What do you think about this, Nikolai?
Спасибо большое. Thanks for the introduction. Indeed, we have known each other for quite a long time, and we have discussed this subject. And I must say first that Surgut Neftegas does not produce that much oil. There are some other national companies that produce more. However, we have occupied a niche of the market for the past 8-10 years. We have been maintaining the level of production of 61.5 million. It is 8 BCM of natural gas per year. With respect to the subject matter that we have been discussing today, I would like to briefly tell you that we started a joint project with the exchange, and all the other oil companies were the stakeholders, and it referred to the readiness of both sellers and buyers, and together with the team of the exchange, we have prepared the software. We have developed the rules, the schedules of the cargo transportation that we coordinate with the Transneft company and the Ministry of Energy. So a lot of groundwork was performed to develop the rules and regulations and standards to attempt trading at the exchange. The reason why it was not successful, there are many objective and subjective factors for that, and I think the experts of the exchange can explain you why it never materialized. As far as Surgutneft gas is concerned, we sell 1/2 of the produce domestically and export the other half, and we make use all the types of contracts, spot trading, mid-term and long-term and short-term, and based on the current situation at the market and based on our assessment of the trends at the market and choosing the strategies that we undertake to implement at the moment. And of course, the latest changes that we and you observe at the market, volatility and advent of new oil grades and increase of the trading in some oil grades and cutting of the trading in the other, competition of the grades of Brent and WTI, and we are very closely monitoring the exchange, trading through auctions. There are many agents, methods, and each of those entities respond to the changes taking place in the industry. They introduce those things into the calculation of into the pricing, and in the past 10 years there are changes. It's not revolutionary, but there are changes in the methods of pricing, and the changes are very intensive and vigorous right now. And for us now get lost in the wide range of the quotations and arbitration between the quotations. We think it is very important in the near future to develop direct trading that will set the prices on the foundation of the supply and demand in the most democratic and transparent manner, when there are buyers and sellers and there's movement of the price. And I think the processes are getting complicated, and that's why the stakeholders are trying to set up direct contacts. We have seen the methods that have been developed based on the preliminary trading by our colleagues from Bиржа Neft and Rosneft, and I think in the near future our company Surgutneft Gas, still using the framework that was used before, but still we will be making use of the auctions in the near future. Thank you, Jorge. I hope I have answered your questions, and the participants were interested to hear to me.
Thank you, Nikolai, and I hope I fully understood and I can summarize your message. But what I got out of your comments is that you're friendly to technology, you're friendly to action, to auctions, you're friendly to price discovery. And maybe some of the initial efforts didn't deliver what was expected, but I think that always happens when you start something new. And I get a feeling that maybe some of the efforts in Russia were a little bit ahead of their time. And I'm sorry that I'm a little bit on this side, but I'm becoming a little bit more curious, and I am the chairman, so it goes. My apologies for that. But I'll get to that side. So the next question I have is for Dennis. As I understand, Dennis, your company participates also very actively in meeting customers and your counterparts using electronic systems, and you're availing yourself to the new technology. Can you elaborate on that, and is that correct?
Спасибо.
Thanks, Jorge, for the question. Indeed, Zarubezhneft was the first entity that started selling crude at the exchange, and we've been doing it for the past 5 years. 100% of oil that is exported is sold at the exchanges. And of course, it's not the configuration that we have been starting. And this mechanism has been developing jointly with the exchange. We are developing the functionality of the exchange and to enhance transparency. And previous speakers have referred to transparency, and transparency accounts for competition, and it is the prerequisite that the pricing will be objective, and the company will be performing efficiently. And it is the transparency at the exchange that attracts us, and it lays down the foundation for us being efficient as far as trading is concerned. And the auctions and the other mechanisms at the exchange are getting better with every passing year. Jointly with the exchange and our buyers, we review the functionality, and some of the buyers see that there are some bottlenecks that reduce the efficiency, but we work together, we cooperate with the exchange, thanks to Alexei, and there is a trend to increase the efficiency of such trading operation. And we are satisfied with the results of our activity at the exchange. Talking about the oil sales on the whole, and I should say that we use exchange to sell oil at the local, at the domestic market. We have sold 1.5 million tons at the local market, at the domestic market. It doesn't work 100% perfectly, but transparency is important, and transparency begets efficiency. As far as new technologies, digital technologies are concerned, I must say that I have been taking part in the digital transformation in the oil industry session before that, and the digitalization is only a tool that is designed to provide additional value, additional efficiency, and we would try to find the areas where digitalization could provide additional efficiency. Take blockchain technology. It is actually the tool of automation for fixing the contract, but it does not give transparency, because the blockchain just fixes the deal, the transaction, after there is a deal between the two parties. And our purpose, our vision is to provide transparency of pricing before the transaction is finalized. That's what we are doing together with the exchange. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dennis. And I have been coming to Russia for maybe a couple of decades or a little bit less than that. And I am witnessing a change in the approach. Many years ago, the talk of transparency didn't exist here. The talk of systems really didn't exist here. Everybody wanted to keep it offline, so to speak. And now there is a welcoming change here in attitude, in approach, in process, and that's great for everybody because it creates opportunities. It makes really the determination of the taxation number and profitability of a company more robust. So that dovetails quite well into Mr. Golomolzin, who unfortunately will have to leave very soon. But in your role as a government entity, in theory, this development that seems to be accelerating, where price discovery is now partly happening online and growing. We heard that Dennis has tried 1.5 million metric tons, and Surgut is exploring those opportunities as well. How do you see that, and how do you see Rosneft operating in those areas as well? If you could elaborate a little bit.
Thanks, Jorge. I will try to give answers to all the questions one after another. You have said that some who work in the IT agencies doubt the reliability of the information that they operated well, and the information, the concerns are transformed into suspicions, and that's why we start investigations. But we do not limit ourselves to investigations. We realize it is necessary to address the challenges jointly. And the issue of the exchange trading in Russia is one of the issues of the state policy with respect to the competitiveness, and it is included into the presidential address. And trading at the exchange and price indexing is meant for the market to be competitive. There are markets with oligopolic structure, so the oil and petroleum products market is just like that, and it is typical not only for Russia but for the other countries as well. And it is important to take decisions regarding the objective pricing. This to be done with the underpinning of the applicable law, with the participation of all the stakeholders. And in Russia, these efforts are undertaken in the exchange committee, and many of the participants of this session are the members of the committee, and we have some 200 meetings per year on different aspects of exchange trading. We undertake to build a triangle of prices. It is the exchange prices, non-exchange prices, and the prices compatible with the foreign pricing mechanisms. These indicators will have to be compatible, aligned. One methods should be used to calculate them, and each of these indicators should be representative. Talking about the volume of the exchange trading in Russia, then the international benchmarks in this respect should not be separated from the price indicators, both international and domestic. So the volume of trading is 1 trillion rubles, and the volume of trading of derivatives is 20 trillion. And if we talk about the benchmark projects for Urals grade, yes, we have been working on that. It's a complicated issue. It cannot be resolved just like that, and that's why we are working in a few areas. Among other things, we develop the market of the deliverable futures, and we trade 130,000 tons of oil products as deliverable futures. The depth of the sales was 3 months now. We are selling forward for 12 months, and this changes the situation in the market, and it can optimize the trading. We are planning to have a deliverable contract for petroleum products, and there is an agreement of the major stakeholders of the market for the system to be implemented. Besides, regularly we register non-exchange transactions, but it is done at the exchange platform. And to alleviate your skepticism and concerns and suspicions, the volume that we have at the exchange is transferable. It is fixed in the regulations, and there are contracts for 520 million tons, and that 250 million tons are the contracts for exports, and the other contracts for the domestic markets. We register some 300 million tons of contracts for petroleum products 3 days after the transaction. The situation is reliable, and it just covers the concluded transactions. And there are 603 million tons of coal that is registered annually. Jorge, who has been working in the Information and Analytical Agency, realizes that that kind of volume is not compatible with the global Information Analytical Agency, and it does not the top tier of transparency. But we have the price indices, and in the near future we will launch the contracts on coal. As far as oil is concerned, the volume that we register and the quality of the information that we register enable us to have the price indicators, but those volume are not enough to build the indices. But we are planning to amend the law, the applicable law, and we will make the format of registration of the transactions acceptable to preserve the index to be used in trading of deliverables and indexed contracts. Moscow Exchange trades in Brent, and we use the indicators and the benchmarks from the other areas, but the task is to use Urals with the other indicators as a part of the composite indices using the results of the auctions.
So generally all those conditions enable us to forecast a sustainable development of the domestic markets. Now those indicators are already being used not just by the Federal Anti-Monopoly Service, but also used in the tax policies, and the references to those indicators are also included in the tax code. So they are commonly used, considered reliable, published regularly. So we can use them both for the business purposes and also for different forms of state administration and state policies. So trading at the stock exchange is a foundation for us for creation of shared markets of oil and gas at the Eurasian Economic Union. The corresponding program for creation of these markets has been adopted, and by 2024 those markets will be created, and the stock exchange trade and the indices there would be a foundation. We also conduct similar work at the CIS space. Lately, we've achieved an agreement with our colleagues from the BRICS that we will also move along those development to create a shared stock exchange space with our neighbors. So it is a work in progress. In the nearest future, we expect to be ready to share with the businesses and the society those reliable benchmark and price indicators. Thank you.
Anatoly, thank you very much for your comments, and I will zero in a very important issue you stated, and another one that was stated before. The one before was that maybe some things are not working quite with maybe the technology or the adoption of the systems as well as one would hope. But you mentioned that you have over 200 meetings per year with the customers. And in my experience, if something is not quite being adopted or is not quite delivering what I want, I can refine it and work and obtain the best result if I engage repeatedly with the customer. So then I can define what he really needs and deliver it. So it seems to me from the discussion, and again, I'm sorry for my left side that most of the conversation has happened so far on the right side, systems and processes seem to be going the right way. So if I were to put it on a chart and I say, is it improving or degrading, I would say it's improving. And I wanted to invite Pavel Sorokin to maybe make a couple of comments for us to see what is their view from the ministry. Is it going in the right direction? And I'm going to ask a very provocative question. Price formation at the core is set by the publishers that have had this function for a long time, namely Argus, Platts primarily, In and Out, Reuters, and things like that. Is there any possibility that the Ministry of Energy can bolt in some of these auction results or futures SPIMEX results into the taxation system? Not fully, but just a little percentage to enable growth.
Thanks a lot for the question. Я продолжу на русском, наверное.
I'll keep speaking Russian. I apologize for showing up with a slight delay, so I'll be brief in answering your question. What is the key objective of the government from the viewpoint of taxation and price formation? We need to understand what is the actual price of a commodity on the market in order to tax it properly. The objective of the companies is obviously to minimize the price of this commodity. What is the objective of a foreign trader? To minimize the price of the commodity. So there is a certain triangular of interests of the participants of this process. Apart from that, there is obviously stock exchange, and the objective of the stock exchange is to properly push the huge volume through in that in order to get their fees. So we get even four corners in this figure. So what the government and the industry is willing to avoid is the following. Now we have a clear system of price tags and clear price formation policy. There are certain shortcomings, we all know them, and obviously the system is dominated by foreign traders. It is obvious to any participants, and it is obviously not reflective of the actual picture. But that's what we'll be having, and everybody acknowledges it. So an attempt to violate this fragile balance can result in bad results. So if we create some prerequisites that if there is a conflict situation between the market players and if they will not use our system, we'll have huge disbalances. We will tax them on one quotation that does not respect the reality. Maybe it might be too high for the purposes of the taxation, and the company would still be selling them at a lower price and the taxes go up, which is wrong, and that should not be the case. So our objective is to keep this balance in place and achieve a consensus. What we're very much concerned about, and that was mentioned by Anatoly and by Mr. Rybnikov for sure, we have 11% of the global oil market. So why shouldn't we use our own services and the natural advantage we have here? So the physical deliveries with Urals are clearly bigger than any other oil grade. It is a clear advantage of Russia. We need to find a compromise with our foreign colleagues. We understand that we cannot force anyone into doing anything, and that would always result in a disaster, and oil grade would simply cease to exist because everybody would stop using them. So we need to create proper environment. And the question you raised on the possible tax breaks, well, that is one of the options, but you have to be very careful there. We have to think of the regulational mechanisms and elimination of administrative hurdles, because by using taxes only, we are provoking manipulations. That is possible, but that would be wrong. And you cannot resolve any issue with tax breaks. But it would be important to streamline the processes, eliminate excessive hurdles, and once the infrastructure and procedures works fine, that becomes possible. So that might be co-financing, that might be using of the Moscow Stock Exchange and individuals trading there, creation of good futures platform. Unfortunately, I wasn't at the presentation by Anatoly, but the work we've conducted with the St. Petersburg Mercantile Stock Exchange, I can say, is great. Despite certain disbalances that we generally encounter in this sector, it still works. There is liquidity, and you can actually buy there certain commodities. There is a sufficient amount of buyers and sellers creating this stock exchange. Keep it going without any tax breaks. Thanks to the effort of the Federal Anti-Monopoly Service and the agencies and the traders, it was created. It would be a bit harder, obviously, if we go for the foreign market because there are standard competitors, but luckily we have some success stories. And we, on our side, can be more active in this regard. But our objective is to support the companies in making very first steps in order to push it forward. We have Urals from the FOP Primorsk, but there are certain barriers, lack of liquidity, insufficient number of tools and instruments that can be developed there, but we work to eliminate those hurdles.
Thank you very much for your comments, and I think very wise words, that one is to be watchful, that there is not an inequity where you have too many buyers and not, or too many sellers and the price is deviated one way or another. And this dovetails, thank you very much, very nicely in the role that the price reporting agencies have to do. They essentially currently offer also an imprimatur to determine if the price is right. So I want to invite Joel to make some comments.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Коллеги.
Joel, how is your access to data? Do you feel you have enough to properly represent the Urals markets? If you were to audit the volume of transactions that you fully have confirmed and you have full trust on it, is it enough? Would you pass the test?
I'd like to. I certainly think we would pass the test. I'd like to think we would. The main difference over the years that Mario mentioned as well, the huge wealth of data that we receive, not only in physical bids and offers, but just in heard, indications that we hear in the market, is now far greater than when you and I worked together at Platts many years ago. Due to the transparency that everyone's mentioned so far is absolutely critical, and in the Platts market on close, for example, it's not just hearsay, it's not just he said, she said, it's or I'm prepared. So it's physical bids, physical offers that we're publishing daily. At S&P Global, the parent company of Platts, we're not so much a publishing company anymore. We're a data company. And we are now publishing thousands of data points throughout the day to help guide our assessments. Now, in the Urals market, of course, the spot market is far smaller than that term market. It's far smaller than the market that lies behind. However, by giving people the opportunity to be transparent about it, we believe we give the market the best opportunity to show the real price. And in Urals is a great example of a benchmark kind of waiting to happen, but has those big hurdles that we've talked about at this event previously and in other locations as well. A benchmark is a product of trust. I probably said the same thing here last year. And I think that while it is an enormous flow and a very important flow of crude oil, the fact is it does have its shortcomings. We saw the organic chloride issue not too long ago. Of course, if anything was set against Urals, then of course it would that shock wave would be sent down the chain. And there are other benchmarks that flourish. We've seen WTI grow significantly. We see Dated Brent continue to go from strength to strength despite its the challenging dwindling supplies. More adaptation, more evolution in that benchmark market will definitely continue. But on the data points you mentioned, I think I want to touch on something that Miriam said about the important stuff that humans can do, the stuff that a machine necessarily can't. We invested in a machine learning and AI company called Kensho last year that has the ability to guide an assessment to a degree. It doesn't necessarily do the assessment. The AI can do an assessment very easily if it's a narrow bid-ask spread. If it's a very commoditized market, very little variation. Anyone, my 6-year-old child could assess a forward curve on Brent because there's such good liquidity and it's so commoditized. The fact is, though, is if let's say there's no liquidity, let's say there's a bid and ask spread that's quite wide. Let's say that there's a cargo of diesel that has a different specification to another cargo of diesel on the offer side. That's where the humans come in. So the efficiencies that are being gained, not only in Urals, not only in other crude oil grades, but in all the data that we're assessing at Platts, that data has a significant opportunity to be further refined by machine learning, by AI, and I'm fascinated by the work that Vector's doing, in fact, with your partners, and looking forward to hearing more about that.
Follow through and maybe getting a little bit deeper. Dennis mentioned that he had engaged in commerce at the tune of 1.5 million metric tons per annum, or recently.
Yeah.
Has Platts and Argos, and I'll ask Argos the question later, how much of that volume did you capture in your mechanism?
Right, so in confirmed bids and offers on any given day, we'll tend to see a bid or an offer of, a typical cargo standard size. It might be none, but it might be up to 3 or 4 on any given day. And each cargo being in the north 100 KT, in the south 80 or 140,000 tons. So we're reflecting the bids and the offers that we see. Of course, that's just the tip of the iceberg. We know that, you know that. The transparency isn't necessarily a trader's friend. As you remember, when we introduced the market on close 15 years ago in refined products, in Europe, it wasn't universally popular because people were very happy to trade in the shadows or just to, not necessarily be as transparent as they could be. But the data points are certainly increasing. And as for Urals, we're also seeing increased data points in, for example, the swaps market, also in CPC blend, for example. We're also seeing a forward market developing in there. And these are the kind of things that a market needs in order to become a benchmark.
I'm a very binary guy. So what I was trying to get is a yes, no, or 50% of it, or something, and I didn't get that.
Yeah,
so never mind. I take my reading. But so what I see there, I'm in a good mood. Is a room for improvement, and maybe a room where this side of the fence can contribute more to one and all, and hopefully these points of light get adopted by the system. Before I get to my last 2 speakers, which really my apologies for that, I want to ask Transneft, because you issue the concern of organic chloride came up. We have been accustomed to having stability in the quality of Urals, in the quality of Saudi grades, and having complete mayhem in the American grades. I don't know what they are. Nobody knows what they are until they kind of get assembled and put together. But Russia has been very steady up to this year. So what I want to ask Sergey is this incident we had earlier this year. And I was working for an oil company at the time, and we had to reset ourselves and be very fast about how we avoided harm. Hasn't been addressed, fully put to bed? Do we have the confidence that going forward the quality issues have been addressed or at least managed for the time being?
Thank you for the question, Jorge. Certainly, the issue of quality is one of the key factors in definition of a price of oil that is publicly traded. And the incident that you refer to that happened in April, everybody touched upon that, so I'll comment on that. Yes, indeed, in April we had this incident when organic chlorides ended up in Transneft pipeline. Thanks to the quick response from the side of the Ministry of Energy and our colleagues from other organizations, namely from the Republic of Belarus, Ukraine, our Hungarian partners and other European companies, we managed to localize this issue. And as of today, we've eliminated all the restrictions, and now it operates fault-free. That is Druzhba pipeline. That is the key pipe artery delivering oil to the European market. We've obviously tested it for the content of organic chlorides by the recipients of our oil. As I said, we fully recovered the operations of the pipeline, so there is no longer oil with organic chlorides on the territory of Belarus, and now we are more or less in standard modes of operation, and we're working to normalize the quality of oil that is on the territory of Russia at the moment. And I'm confident to say that all the oil that is being supplied to the refineries of Russia and the key export terminals is compatible with the strict parameters set by the government and the technical regulations of the Eurasian Economic Union. As for stability that the market has been used to from the viewpoint of the quality of Urals, well, undoubtedly, we would like to assure the market that it was a very unpleasant incident, an exception from the rule. And thanks to the measures we're taking and will be taken in the future, we're confident we will avoid any type of such incidents in the future. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your declarative comments. If I were a journalist, which I am not, I would write, Transneft is confident it has addressed the issues and the market can expect reliable supplies. And then I would track. Trust but verify, as one of your friends used to say. I appreciate that. So going back again to the left, for Argus, this issue of changing quality is very critical for the industry. It's very critical for price determination. When I was in Platts, I set systems that were very rigid, and the price, therefore, conforms to a certain standard. I don't know what Platts is doing right now, whether they have gone a little bit soft or remain very hard on those things, it's their issue. But there is obvious competition between the two companies. One hosts Dated Brent, is the custodian of that benchmark, and Argus, while it's trying to come up with new Dated Brents, is also focusing a lot of effort into the U.S. The U.S. is obviously a market with a huge volume, growing, and its presence is being felt globally. But is the price discovery mature, or is it still not meeting the guidelines we have been talking about here? A transparent execution, an auction-type mechanism, a verifiability of data. Is the American system actually behind the Russian system? What are your thoughts and how confident you are that you can bring it into a real competitor to Dated Brent?
Just to clarify, one quick word, when we say putting focus onto the WTI and the US barrels, you mean into Europe, I think, because Argus is basically the benchmark for the US system, of course. So in terms of bringing Urals, US barrels into Europe, it's clearly a flow that we have to try to bring into the pricing mechanism. I mean, 1 million barrels a day at least and rising is not to be ignored. It's more than the Brent overall total production for the system that sets the dated Brent benchmark, and so clearly needs to be part of the solution if people believe that the liquidity is dropping in terms of European pricing. And the solution that we have is that there should be delivered market for WTI, which it exists. So we aren't there to create a market; we're there to reflect markets, and the transparency is increasing. It's still a very young market, and therefore it's only increasing on its early stages. And the news this week is that we have the first activity on the Argus Open Markets, which is the electronic platform which gathers bids and offers for crude oil delivered to Europe. That includes the WTI grade and also Urals and CPC, West African and the BFOET Brent complex as well. So that's sort of something that is starting and it's been very well welcomed by the industry as another area, another way to reflect price in the complex in Europe. And coming to your other point about the US grades on quality, we have seen that there is value in having different approaches. We had the approach of putting quality specifications against the standard methodology for the grade coming into the assessment, and for us it is, as we say, it's a new market. The difficulty of the WTI is it is lots of different component grades that come in to become one stream, if you like. So to make sure that people understand what quality is being assessed and being offered, there's some specifications, and then the companies can add different qualifications of the quality if that is going to be needed. So it's a specification-based system, and making sure that is robust right through the methodology.
Okay, I appreciate that, and I want to be very fair. I asked Joel a very pointed question on volume in Russia, so I must ask you a very pointed question on volume in the US. If the incremental shale production in the US is, say, 5.5 million barrels, and we were to run a numeracy exercise in the volumes you capture for your price determination in Argus, what percentage are you capturing of all those barrels traded in the US?
Well, let's put it into perspective probably in that we have in the US, the benchmark that we have in there is one of the most liquid that there is, because it is based on a volume-weighted average. And
by the way, I don't know the answer. This is not a leading question. It's a genuine question.
So the US based has probably 25 trades a day. It's not based on a cargo size, it's based on a smaller
25 for what size?
For pipeline size volume. So
30.
Many,
so
but smaller. Many, but smaller.
600, 700,000 barrels a day out of 5.5 million. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Am I doing the mathematics
25,
correct?
It's up to 600,000 to 800,000 barrels a day at Houston, and then more at Midland in terms of actual deal information.
But this is a new market, of course, and I congratulate you on the advance we had this week. The pipeline provenance is critical, I think, and with that comes that specification that gives the confidence that any new benchmark needs. In our market on close, we've had 10 trades from Corpus Christi already, which is again, it's a good start, but it will only get bigger. To William's point, I agree. It's a volume that cannot be ignored, and to see bids and offers in both our processes, more often, in our case daily, is a great sign of success of a market that's really picking up. And one day, will it start to be a benchmark for European barrels, indeed more global barrels? I think there's a very good chance of that. The more it increases, the greater the chance.
Well, this dovetails very well with the second to last speaker, if we get the time. Mark, you are you're a market maker, a participant, and a user of data. A slightly complicated question. Are you open to consider this, the result of these new mechanisms emerging here in Russia, providing liquidity into those systems? And are you also adopting the new systems in the US? Do you see a runway for the American markets? Do you see a runway for the Urals market?
Sorry, a runway in what regard, Jorge?
In becoming more important in price generation.
Oh, no question at all. Let me just say, so in the 26 years that I have been involved in the trading business of my 36-year Shell career, there are three things which I think really dominate that period of my life. And in terms of issues that the market's been wrestling with. One, of course, is benchmark evolution, which of course is a key discussion here. And goodness knows, every single year, whether it's been in products or crude, we've been discussing the issue of what should be in a benchmark, what should the new benchmarks be. And I give you 3 R's to think about. Making sure that any benchmark, if you're going to be part of any benchmark, if you are going to be a new benchmark, you have to be robust in terms of liquidity, you have to be reliable in terms of quality, and you have to be representative to the people that use it. You have to be relevant to the producers and the refiners. If you forget any one of those elements, and I congratulate Transneft, by the way, for the efforts to turn around the situation around that reliability issue, and I think the whole industry should be congratulated, traders, producers, refiners, in terms of how they react to that crisis, and of course Transneft as well. And I know there's an awful lot of commercial conversations still to happen on that, but the response and the trust that hopefully will come out of this will be great. But that's one thing, benchmarks. So when you think about the US, when you think about Russian crudes, they have ultimately got to meet those 3 criteria to be part of a future benchmark. Secondly, the issue of compliance. In my 26 years in trading, the regulator interest has gone up every single year. Jorge, you were part of that move. We had many conversations 16, 17, 18 years ago about that very conversation. And we in Shell very much, we believe transparency and free competition is critical, and we understand that's exactly what the regulators are looking for as well. So you've got to consider the regulatory requirements in that, and again, that ties in with the benchmarks, meeting those various criteria I talked about earlier. And the last element is a little bit about the how, the digitalization. So perhaps this will be relevant in due course to measuring the quality of these US crudes, being more confident around the quality of Russian crude, and so forth, or any part of any benchmark. But we do believe, I just want to maybe challenge one point that was made earlier. We don't think blockchain is in any way, shape or form a detractor from transparency. We think blockchain is the bedfellow of transparency, because to have transparency, there's only point in having transparency if it's the truth and the single source of the truth. And we passionately believe that digitalization is going to be a bigger part of all of our futures in the oil trading, and supply business, whether you're a producer, a refiner or a trader, and we intend to be a very big part of that journey. And in benchmark development, we think that's going to become ever more critical, and particularly for the sorts of crudes that you've just been referring to.
Transparency and reliability, data integrity are very critical, and that really, and I'm very mindful of the time, brings us to Taggy. And my apologies for you being the last in this sequence. You represent a producer, and you have grades that have the quality that is very attractive globally. And it seems to me that as the Asian markets grow, more of your output will head into Asia, and we are seeing that also in the Russian markets. Are you open to new benchmarks? And how do you see the efforts by ADNOC to try to make Murban a new benchmark? More so in light of the current political instability, if I'm going to be polite, that is happening in the area, because those are kind of the region that you will be competing more into the future. Are you open to new mechanisms?
First of all,
I want to thank the organizers for the invitation, and I'm happy to represent SOCAR at this event. Jorge, thank you for the question. I'm pleased to join this top-notch panel, and I would like to take a minute to represent to myself. My name is Tagizada. I work for SOCAR now over 10 years. I started off with SOCAR as a graduate of SOCAR Total Scholarship Program after holding several positions within SOCAR's marketing and operations department in Baku. I was transferred to Geneva, where I'm functioning now as a deputy head of global physical trading for over 5 years now. I've been involved and responsible for maximizing and further improving the marketing and trading positions within our portfolio. Coming more to the question of Jorge, today as SOCAR we trade from 5 to 10 million barrels a month of barrels that are being arbed mainly out of the Black Sea and Mediterranean markets to Northwest Europe, Far East, North, and even South America. It is one of our priorities to maintain that flow. As our flagship crude oil, as Light, is now for more than 10 years barrel trading globally. Obviously, under these circumstances, we do face regular demands for considering sales on various benchmarks that are utilized around the world. To be fair, maybe 80% to 90% of our sales still take place basis Brent. But we do receive and we do face demands for WTI or Dubai Oman pricing. Due to our in-house expertise and capacity, we're able to accommodate those requests and transfer the prices within various regions to satisfy the needs of the counterparts and their customers. As it comes to the new benchmarks, of course, SOCAR is always interested to explore further and build around its portfolio and explore new benchmarks. But without trying to oversimplify, basically today there's only 3 things you can do with crude oil, right? You can only burn it for power, which is probably not the best one. You can store it, also not very workable under current market conditions, and the obvious choice, you refine it. So I think that the change to new benchmarks should come from the refining or end user's perspective as much as it comes from producers. Because in the end, whether it's traders in between, whether it's producers, everyone would be keen to explore various markets from the perspective of the end users and their needs in terms of finding new benchmarks and using them. Obviously, SOCAR is highly interested in participating in the markets which are transparent and responsible in their approach.
Thank you very much, Tagi. And I want to thank the group here, and I saw commonality in interest. We have an interest in data integrity, transparency, technology, and I perceive a desire to try to new systems and build new systems to make the system more robust. That came across very strongly from all the participants here, and very much so from the Russian side. And of course, people like Mark have been on that road for a long time. So thank you very much, and I want to thank you for your patience with us. Thank you.